Welcome to this video on setting up multi-tenancy in Totara. In this video, we'll focus on the multi-tenancy tools introduced in Totara version 13 and show you how to enable and set up tenants. Multi-tenancy is disabled by default, so let's start by turning it on. I'll go to Configure Features and scroll down to find the option to enable multi-tenancy support. I'll save to complete this. Now, when I go to my Quick Access menu, you can see a new Tenants option. I'll select this to set up my first tenant. You can set up as many different tenants on your site as you need. I'll add my first tenant and give it a name and identifier. Identifiers must be unique and must start with a letter. They can only contain lowercase letters and numbers. When a new tenant is created, it is created with its own category for learning content, a set audience of all tenant members and participants, and its own dashboard. You can choose to give these their own unique names, or leave these fields blank to have them named after the tenant by default. You can also choose to base your dashboard on an existing dashboard on your site. Once you're ready, add tenant. I'll add a couple more tenants to my site using the same process. So, I've got my tenants, but they don't contain any content or anyone to access it. Adding and managing users and tenants is covered in another video, so let's have a quick look at the other tasks to complete. On selecting a tenant, I'm immediately given the option to add a new course. Adding a course within a tenant follows the same process as adding a course at site level, so let's assume I've now done that. By default, this task can be done by course creators at site level or domain managers within the tenant. My new course sits within the tenant category. If you want to break this category down further, you can also add subcategories just as you would at site level. Remember that courses created within a tenant are only visible and accessible to users in that tenant. The same is true for performance activities such as check-ins, appraisals and 360 feedback, and workspaces if you have Totara Perform and Totara Engage enabled. You'll also want to set up the dashboard for your tenant. Tenant dashboards sit alongside all other site dashboards in the Manage Dashboards area. Tenant dashboards can only be edited by users with the appropriate permissions. By default, this is site administrators and site managers. You could, of course, add this permission to a tenant domain manager, but this would allow those users access to edit all dashboards on the site, not just the dashboard for their own tenant. So far, we've enabled multi-tenancy and set up our tenants. Users within those tenants can now see both their own tenant content, their dashboard and content within their category, and any site-wide content. This allows you to have a mix of tenant and wider content. For example, if your site supports a group of businesses, you may provide generic training at group level, which would sit at site level in your Totara site. Each company in the group could then have their own tenant, which provided more specific organisation level training within their category. However, if you want further separation of tenants, there is an experimental feature in Totara called Isolation Mode. When switched on, users in a tenant can only see the content within that tenant. Anything else on the site would be restricted. This includes any features currently unsupported by multi-tenancy, such as learning plans. To enable Isolation Mode, go to Experimental Settings and Enable Tenant Isolation. Be aware that this feature is listed as experimental because it has not been possible for Totara to test every possible use case. It should therefore be used with caution. So that's enabling multi-tenancy and adding tenants with their own learning content. We recommend that you also watch the related video on tenant user management for more information.